Good morning. Looks like the signal went a bit there. Good morning. If you just joining, the signal seemed a bit shaky then. If you are signed in, can you just send me a message? Just let me know how good or bad the signal is and the picture. It looks okay at my end. Just want to make sure it's okay what you're watching. Good morning again. Sorry about that. Lost the connection a little bit there. If you are signed in, good morning. I can see if people are rejoining again. If you are signed in, do let me know that the connection's okay. I had a few issues with the Wi-Fi. It might be my MacBook, but I had no problems in the previous lockdown. Maybe it's the second lockdown, the old conspiracy theorists. Government's watching us, making sure we're all behaving ourselves. All right, I've got 4 or 5 of you back online now. Hopefully more and more people can click on. Sorry about this, having some Wi-Fi issues at the minute. Like I say, if any of you are signed in, please do write me a question or let me know if the signal is good or bad or the sound quality is okay. I was just saying a minute ago how when I earned my handicap as a teenager, it did me an awful lot of good to get a very high handicap, even though I was sort of ashamed of that handicap. At least I started winning some competitions, and then we sort of get a bit more confidence, then your handicap sort of levels off. It does you some good. And so the governing bodies now are raising the handicap limit to 54 or 45. I'm not altogether sure yet. But if you have a starting point, and I'm going to cover this, I've got 7 stages, I think, of the of attaining a handicap and getting yourself handicap ready. Once you've got those 7 stages sorted, they're very clear, simple stages, not easy, but 7 clear stages, then you're at least handicap ready. You understand how the handicap system works for you. So if you did watch the golf at the weekend, you'd have seen Tiger Woods made a 10 on a par 3. Remarkable, really. I think the world's best player of our generation, second best player of all time, can make 10 strokes on a hole which is 145 yards long. He had some shocking luck on that, but he still made a 10. Now, the moral of that story is that whilst he made a 10 on that hole, he still finished only 4 more than par. So par, what is par? It's a very, very unrealistic number for a start. Par is the number which the professionals are expected to score when they play a round of golf. It's not relevant to the amateur golfer, other than a sort of dim and distant sort of possibility for when you start playing the game. So if the professionals' level is par, then you have to find your par. We're going to come to that later on. Now, Tiger Woods, when he had the 10 on the par 3, of course, that's 7 more shots than the par of that hole, the par being what the pros benchmarked at. So he had 7 more shots than par on that hole. That put his score at 7 over par on that hole. But he finished his round only 4 more than par. So the big moral of the story there is he was completely out of contention when that happened. He wasn't a million miles off contention at the time. He wasn't in a winning position, but he was certainly not a million miles away. He then has a disastrous hole, the worst of his career. I think it might even be a record for him. Certainly one of the highest scores on that hole. We've been a 12 or 13 on there, I think, in the past. But the moral of the story was that when he had that hole, he dug in, he still carried on playing the best that he could do, and he got some of those wasted shots back. And that's a big message for you. If you start badly in a round of golf, it's no determinant to how you're going to finish your round. So when you start getting into scoring and what have you, just write off bad holes, because it happens to everybody. It happens to all the best players. And if you have a bad start, then don't worry, because it doesn't mean you're going to have a bad round entirely. So what is a handicap? Well, a handicap is basically your number more than par. So par, as I say, is a very unrealistic benchmark. And so the par is basically the amount of shots which you take more than par. So the par on this scorecard here for the club, this is a very complicated looking mess of numbers until you sort of familiarize yourself with it. Par is that number there, 71 from those white tees, and from the red tees here, a par 72. So if par is, say, 72 off the red tees and 71 off the white tees, and you shoot 100 shots, then you have a handicap of 28 from the reds and 29 from the whites. There and thereabouts. Now, when we look at your scorecard when it's handed in, we do take some flexibility into account, or the computer takes some flexibility into account. So let's say you have 17 reasonable holes and one terrible hole, then the computer will look at the main theme of your scorecard. It won't look at the general, just the total number. So there is a bit of flexibility there. And also, when you do start making your scorecards and hand them in, then we can look at the scorecards and say, well, there's a better theme there than the occasional bad hole there. So how's your handicap constructed? It is looked at all the shots. So when you play down here, you mark all your scores in as you get into that stage. Right down there, and let's say you do shoot 120 shots. That will then give you 48 over par. And on the new handicap system, they may well look at that and say, okay, well, that's a 45 handicap. They might give you a slightly better handicap than that there. So the way it's constructed, your handicap, is not just the blunt number that you score. There is a little bit of flexibility, is perhaps not the right word, but a bit of sort of common sense applied to how your score has been constructed there. And what I urge you all to do, I'm not sure what stage you're all at now, what I urge you all to do is every time you play, write down your score. Now, if you have a bad hole and you have to pick up your ball, just put an X in the box, but keep writing down your scores. What you want to start doing now is not be fearful of putting a pencil in your hand and writing down the numbers that you score. It gives you a great benchmark, and then you can start to work out what your handicap actually is. Because if your sort of handicap is 54 now, and you need to get to 35 or 36, let's say that's your goal, then you can say, okay, well, I need to work off X amount of shots per round. I need to do it on these holes here. And you start to understand the pattern. I'm going to cover all this very, very shortly. Once you have a handicap, it does change when you're playing competitions. And so the competitions that you play in, your score goes into a computer, and then the better you play, the handicap comes down. The worse you play, the more it goes up. Now, the new handicap system that's coming in, what's in now really, that will definitely be a bit more of a general look at your entire game rather than just one round. But you have one good round or one bad round. Your handicap gets heavily affected at the moment by a good round. This takes more into account the general pattern of play over a period of time. But that's a long way off from you guys at the moment. What you should be looking at first of all is how do you get over the hurdle of earning a handicap. So the first thing I think you've got to do is really work on getting a consistent strike. Nothing's more important to your game. And I'm looking at this now from your golf professional, saying, okay, what's the best thing you can do to earn a handicap? What are the stages that handicap holders have which you have to work towards? The first thing you've got to learn how to strike the ball properly. Now, if you then strike the ball reasonably consistently through your lessons and through your practice and through sort of working on your game, your driver will optimize its distance, your fairway wood will optimize its distance, and that's you then chewing up most of the golf course. If you then can strike your chips reasonably, then that's how you keep your scores quite low. And so the first thing to do is say to your pro or set yourself a goal of, am I striking the ball properly each time? If you're already at that stage and you're sort of a bit more advanced from that, then the next few stages become a lot clearer for you. If you're not at that stage, then the next few stages are going to be tough anyway. So your strike is the first and most important starting point that you have. The second thing is to measure the distance that you hit the ball. If you truly measure, you can do it on the computer, on our radar, or you can pace it out when you're playing. You thought, that was a good drive I hit down that hole. Measure it on a flat hole. Don't measure it on the up or downhill holes because they can be flattering or otherwise. Measure out your distance, literally walk out a pace. Your pace won't be quite a yard. I'm 6'2", my pace is exactly a yard. So if you're smaller than me and your pace is shorter, measure out the paces and add 10%. That'll roughly give you a yardage on the drive. And get used to understanding how far you hit the driver. And then also get used to counting out how far you hit your second club, be it your 5-wood, your 7-wood, or your rescue wood. I would urge you to have a 5-wood in your bag, or at least learn how to use it, or at worst case, a 7-wood. They're more powerful than rescue woods. If you then work out how far you can hit a drive and how far you can hit your 7-wood or your 5-wood, then you can piece together what's the most amount of distance you can cover in 2 shots. Now, then we start talking about the what we call greens and regulation. If you take our 4 par 3s at the club, the first par 3 in the golf course off the men's tees is 201 yards. That's a huge par 3. Very, very long par 3. It's also heavily guarded, so that ball more or less has to carry in the air a full 200 yards. That's an incredibly tough hole. Off the yellow tees, that hole's 192 yards, not a lot of advantage. And off the red tees, 168, and it's all mostly in the air. So that's a very, very long par 3. The next par 3 is 137 yards off the whites, 130 off the yellows, and 116 off the reds. And this is where it gets where you've got to really get clever with your golf. The world's #1 player cannot hit that green in less than 1 shot. So if you can get somewhere near that green in 1 shot and then learn how to chip on the green for 2 shots, you're only 1 shot behind the world's best player and you're on the green. And that's how you start understanding how distance works in this game. Because if your drive goes, let's say, 150 and your second shot goes, say, 120, that's 270 yards. Off the red tees, the first hole's 280, so you're nearby to that in 2 shots. Fourth is 256, fifth 264, sixth 234, seventh 168, 11th 289, 12th is 293, 13th 116, 14th 149, and then the 17th is 182. So then you start to see that the distance that you hit the ball, let's say you can hit 2 shots at 290 yards, then you go, that's actually half the golf course I can achieve and get close to it in 2 shots. If you get close to it in 2 shots, chip on the green, take 2 putts, then you made a 5 on that hole. That's half the golf course covered in 5 shots each time. That's a lot easier said than done. I totally get that. But you've got to start structuring what you're capable of. Now, I think if you're hitting the driver 150 and the second shot 120, that adds up to 270. Some of you will be hitting the ball longer than that, and some of you will be hitting the ball shorter than that, but at least you know. So you've got to learn how to measure. Now, the second thing is once you've measured those distances, say to your pro, I want to hit the ball further. Yeah, put some pressure on him or me, whoever, if you're out there, I'm one of your one of my charges. Try and get more distance on the ball. Once you know what your distances are, then you say, well, look, there's certain holes there which become very, very hard for me. Then you start to understand that 100 acres out there, you can formulate a plan, but you won't formulate that plan unless you truly know how far you're hitting your driver and your second shot. Then you can work out just how capable you are of reaching those holes. So number 1, you've got to strike it. Number 2, you've got to hit your driver and your second wood and measure out those distances. So number 3, you've got to become a good high chipper and a good low chipper. We have quite small, heavily banked greens around here. Now, if you want to keep your scores low, you've got to be able to hit the ball high over a short distance around here. So let's say you do cover half the golf course in 270 shots, half the holes in 270 yards, I beg your pardon, and you get near to the green, we do know that you can sort of really rack up your score or control the score if you're knocking the ball onto the green with the high lofted clubs. So let's look at do some maths here now. Dustin Johnson won the Masters of the weekend, and on Saturday he hit the ball on average 318 yards off the tee. That's remarkable. He hit every fairway. Incredible, remarkable. Now times that by 14 times that he hit the driver. He didn't hit the driver on the par 3s. That then equals 4,452 yards he covered in 14 shots. Yep. If we then take away the rest of the yardage of the golf course, which is like 7,700 yards, then thereabouts, he then had 3,200 yards left, which he covered in something like 50-something shots. So it just shows the short game is where all the game is controlled by these guys. So yes, they're hitting the ball a massive distance, 318 yards off the tee. I mean, that's longer than 9 of our holes on the golf course here. But he's taking substantially more shots the closer he gets to the hole. So you can then start to see even the world's best, yes, they bomb it miles, but they're taking many more shots to get the ball into the hole. So one of my favorite quotes about the game isn't about how far, it's about how near. So if you keep getting your short shots close to the hole, it takes the pressure off. So there's 2 shots you need to master. One is the high shot over a short distance. So when I say short distance, if you look at the format of a golf course, the design of a golf course, the bunkers are always green side. They're very close to the green, incredibly sort of tucked into the edges of the green, really. Anything which is just beyond that range of the bunkers, so there's the green and then the bunkers on the other side of it, anything around that range there, you should become good with a sandwich to hit the ball high over those bunkers. If you don't have to hit it high over a bunker, then you can play a low running shot, but you need to have those 2 shots in your bag. The 4th step to getting your handicap is truly understanding long and short putts. If I can boil the game down into 4 departments, it's the driver and the fairway wood, it's the high and the low chip, it's the long and the short putts. Those 3 departments, I beg your pardon. Just learn those 3 things. Get the driver and fairway wood working, high and low chips, and then short and long putts. If you become a good long putter, then you put the ball too close to the hole, then you become a good short putter then because the pressure's off your short putting. Now, you and I, believe it or not, are as good as Dustin Johnson and Tiger Woods when we're 1 millimeter from the hole. We never miss. We just never miss those 1 millimeter putts. Sadly, the further we get away, the more putts we take. Now, there are certain tipping points where the professionals take more than 2 points. I think it's 38 foot from the hole. They start to make 2.01 putts throughout the course of a season. So if the pros at 38 foot are starting to make more than 2 putts, take 3 putts yourself if you can. And what I urge you to do is when you're on the putting green practicing, is actually pace out how long the putt is. Really get used to understanding the game. Remember, it's not how long, it's how near. And you've got to start to understand and sort of put into a format what those distances really are. So when I look at a putt on the putting green, the first thing I do is I walk it out. Oh, it's 10 yards, it's 11 yards, it's 10 paces, 12 paces. Then I start getting a sort of benchmark in my mind that when I go on the golf course, I can say, well, I practiced this putt earlier. It's not quite as long as when I was practicing, so this might be 12 or 13 yards. If you become a good long putter, feel for distance on the long putting, and you practice it, you can only do it by practicing. There's a million different ways of holding the putter. You know, some pros hold it like that, some like that, some go that way, some have the very long putters, you know, some overlap all the fingers here. They find a comfortable position for the hands to be on the handle, they can find a comfortable length putter, and then they practice the putting, the long putt. If you practice the long putts over and over and over again before you play, so every time you come down here, if you've committed to come to the club and you're spending the time, use your time judiciously and get on that putting green and work on the long putts. If you become a good long putter, you become a good short putter. Okay, we're now going to look at the scorecard in a bit more detail, and we're going to truly understand par and also what par means to you. So we have the holes here, 1 to 18. From the white tees, there's the distances, and from the white tees, those are the yardages. We'll just use those as our reference point. The white tees are men's competition, typically. Yellow tees are men's day-to-day. Red tees are typically the ladies' tees. Lots of clubs in the States have 8 or 9 tees, and they say to you, okay, well, how far do you hit the ball? Go and play off certain tees. Because there's no point you and I, as a beginner, playing, or as a handicap establisher, playing off the same tees and expecting to have the same experience, because let's say I hit my drive 250 yards and you hit the ball 125 yards, and then that distance is commensurate throughout the bag. I'm hitting the ball twice as far with you with each club. And if that's the case, I'm playing a golf course which is half the length that you're playing. So you should be playing the game off forward tees. If you're a short hitter and you're struggling with distance, get to learn the game off the red tees first of all. Male or female, get to learn the game off the red tees first of all, and then make your way back here. What the world's best players do is they try and play every hole that they play off the very, very back of the tee. So in competitions, when they're practicing in their rehearsal round, they go and play the course as long as possible to stretch themselves. You should be doing it in reverse. Go and play the shortened tees wherever you can. There's a strong argument for having a few games where you play it and start from the start of the fairway and some of the holes which are really long. So understanding par is a very unrealistic number, and it's relative to the length and the difficulty of the hole. Now, some holes are maybe a short par 4 or a long par 4, but they're still par 4s. So, for example, here, our shortest par 4 is 261 yards, and our longest par 4 is 419 yards. So a full 150 yards of difference, and yet the par is the same. So your par, your personal par, when you're working your scorecard, can't be the same for those holes. Now, this is what I was saying to you before about being very mindful of making sure you write down your score every time you play. Even if you're going to play for an hour or play 5 or 6 holes or play 9 holes, keep marking your scores down. You start to see patterns develop. I play Captain Pro matches on a Sunday in the summertime, and my birdie rate is much worse on the short holes than it is on the long holes, the par fours. For whatever reason, it just suits my game more, this golf course, on the holes which are longer, because it's a big advantage for my game to get the big distance. And my second shots seem to be better from further away than they are from close to. So as I look at my scorecards, I look at certain holes which appear short and think, well, I'm not making enough birdies on those holes there. And that's the same for everybody. Tell you this, Tiger Woods, throughout his career, has played the par threes mostly over par throughout the course of a season, and the par fours and par fives heavily under par. So he knows what his par relative scores to par are on the par threes, fours, and fives. And throughout the tours, the players are much worse on the par threes than they are on the par fives. Now you think, well, hang on, the par threes are much easier because they're closer, but you've only got 3 shots to make a par. Whereas on a par 5, yes, the hole is longer, but if you do hit a bad shot, then you can recover it. You've got more allowance to that par. So understanding par is you've got to set down what your par is. Now, if you go out and play, and let's say for argument's sake you shoot, if par is say 72 off the red tees and you shoot 140, then you've got double par. So if you look at a par 4, you call it a par 8. If you go out and shoot 36 over par, then your par is 1.5 times par, thereabouts. And so if you look at the par of a hole, you should look at par 4s and say, well, par 4s are actually par 6s for me. Par 5s are par 7.5s for me. So par 4s are par 6, like I say, par 3s are par sort of 5 or something. And set yourself a number where you say, okay, well, at my handicap standard, then I'm going to try and make a 6 on that 4. Once you start understanding how the scorecard works for yourself, then you can start saying, well, actually, I have a nightmare on that hole every single time. I'm going to make it a par 10. I'm going to try and make a birdie. Oh, yeah, I got a 9 today. I made a birdie on that par 10. It's a great way of softening the hardness of the game. Golf is extremely hard. I've taught the game since I was 19, I suppose, 47 now, so 28 years of teaching it, and I think it's a harder game every day that I teach it. It gets harder and harder, and I look at it, I think, God, this is such a complex game. I understand it more and more, and it's much, much harder. So you've got to set yourself a very realistic target of par. And next time you go out and play, after the lockdown, obviously, why don't you set yourself a really generous par? Have a summer par and a winter par, because the golf course plays so much shorter in the summertime, but it's harder to get a strike. So going back to the second point I made, or the first point I made about understanding the strike, unfortunately, the golf course conditions mean that the strike is much harder when the ground is either very, very firm and there's no turf there and the grass is really short, or when the grass is muddy in the wintertime and we get that sort of splatty strike. Now, if you become a good striker of the ball, then the difference between those two surface conditions becomes less damaging to your game. So it all goes back to the strike. If you become a good striker, and the better you become, the better striker you are, then your game has a much more flexibility and control throughout the season. If you're a good striker of the ball, but you're hitting it left and right, then you need to get a lesson on how you start to control that strike. So yes, the strike is good, but are you putting the right address or the right postcode on the ball when it lands? So you then should always play your par, and then what you should then do is when you start saying, okay, well, actually, I always seem to make a less than my par on that hole, adjust your par accordingly. So the next 4 or 5 times that you go out, you should have a bit of fun when you come in, looking at your scorecard and sort of saying, okay, well, I'm seeing a bit of a theme and a pattern here. You might find, I've got a good friend of mine who I've been teaching all year now, Ian Chapman. He always pars the first. And when he was trying to get his handicap, he started this year. This is a great lesson for you. He started this year as an established beginner. I've been taking lessons for a couple of years, about a few false starts. And now he's just done his handicap of 28 he got in the end. But he always had a good start. And after a while, he started saying, I always have a good start, but I always mess up the second. So he started to see a theme work there. So we worked on establishing a par for him and looking at how he lowered that. He then got out on the golf course and played and kept scorecards all the time, kept a nice body of scorecards, and he wasn't scared of writing down his scores. And you should do the same. Then, once you've done all that, set yourself some long-term goals and make them really realistic. If you want weekend playing rights, then your handicap for a man has to be 23 or better for full weekend playing rights, and for a lady has to be 33 or better. Now, if you're going out and shooting numbers which are way above that, then there's lots of stages between your, let's say, your handicap of 54 and your handicap of 33 for argument's sake if you're a lady. But it's only 21 shots there. Only 21 shots. Now that 21 shots you can soon chip away at if you learn to strike it properly, if you gain some distance with the driver and the rescue wood, and then if you learn how to do the high chip and the low chip, and if you learn how to do the long put and the short put. And I assure you, those are the fundamentals that make a good player establish their handicap. I've watched all the world's best players play live, and yes, they do all the fancy stuff really well, but they do the simple stuff exceptionally well. And of course, they hit the ball a long, long way. Back on planet Earth, and if I look at some of the club golfers that we have here, I look at some of them and say, well, they've really, really developed a game out of not an awful lot of distance, not an awfully good strike, but they're sort of repetitive and consistent. They can sort of do everything okay. Now, if you're someone who's out there watching saying, well, actually, my game's pretty settled, like I just need to get myself a handicap, then, or you say, well, I'm getting good distance, I can strike the ball properly, I can hit high shots and low shots, then perhaps it's just experience now that gets you to the next stage. You might just need to play more frequently, ensure that you're marking the scorecard all the time. The more you do it, then you start to get those scorecards, the scores lowered. I can tell you now, I do it all the time when I'm on the lesson tee. I watch people hitting shots and say, look, I've just measured on the radar here, you've hit that ball 200 yards. That's a very, very, very long way for an amateur golfer to do a ball 200 yards. I'll then talk them through what that means if their second shot goes, let's say, 170, 180. I say, well, look, if you've got 200 yards, it's a massive hit, and your second shot goes 180, and that's 380 yards. You're covering 90 or 80% of the golf course in 2 shots for your distance there. Then what's the difference between that person shooting a 36 handicap and shooting a 24 handicap? It's probably just familiarity with the game. It's probably just putting it all together. And golf is complex because you're out there for such a long period of time. So the final part of the stage, the denouement before you get your handicap, is that little bit of sort of familiarity, the sort of consistency, getting out there, the nerves being calm, and managing yourself. So whenever I look at the coaching process, the first thing you've got to do is understand your technique and your task. For a beginner, that is understanding your strike, understanding your distances. Then you understand your task. You know, am I trying to hit high shots, low shots? What's my how do I utilize my game around this golf course? Whatever the distances that you hit the ball means you've got to sort of plan a different plan of attack. And then the third thing is your self-management, how you manage your anxiety, how you manage your ambition, how you manage your nerves, and how you manage your game, really. So those are the 3 sequences that I use. I say, well, what is the technique okay? Then do they understand their task? Do they understand what they're trying to do? And are they managing themselves on the golf course? Where you are is the first thing you've got to do is strike the ball properly. If you pass that, then fine. Learn how to measure. If you're someone who's established that already, you know you're getting good distance, then learn how to measure your irons as well. Make sure you understand the range which you hit your irons. Not a player in the world hits their iron the same distance every single time. There's no prescriptive distance to how far you hit it. There is a range, and that varies in winter and summer. It varies uphill and downhill. It varies on your very best strike. So let's say, for argument's sake, my very best strike with my 7-iron might get to 170 yards, but I'll also use it from 140, 150 yards if it's a very windy, soggy day. I'll hit a softer shot. And so I'll use that club and say, well, that's the sort of range I know it can go. If you're at that level of your game now and you're trying to earn your handicap, then you should be looking at what's the range that your very best 7-iron or very best irons will go, and what's the sort of typical distance that you hit. And a great test of that is the shortest par 3, the 13th hole. 13th hole off the white tees, 130, yellow tees, 137 off the white, 130 off the yellow, 116 off the reds. Now, if you've got any questions, by the way, type it in. If you're signed in, type them in, because I'll answer them before we end today. Now, I say to amateur golfers all the time, how far do you hit your 7-iron? The male golfer always says 150. Now, if you're a male out there, I'm not being anti-male, it's just the way we are, right? I always hit my 7-iron about 150. Now, that's a hell of a long way for a 7-iron. I then say, well, how far do you, what club do you play on the 13th? And say, I'll typically hit my 5-iron or I'll hit my rescue wood. Now, if that 13th hole is 137 yards and they're hitting a 5-iron or a rescue wood there, then their 7-iron's not carrying 150 yards. And so it gives them a much clearer benchmark. So I would, next time you play, go to the 13th hole and see what club it takes to carry to the front or the middle of that green. That gives you a very good representation there, the limit of a good shot on that hole there. Alrighty, so The next thing, like I said to you, is understanding the two chips. You've got to be good at the high chip, you've got to be good at the low chip. If you're good at those two shots, I assure you you've got a short game. Now, I've not covered bunkers for the reason that you're not in bunkers that often. If you have an okay bunker game, where you can get the ball out once or twice in a round, then that's not going to be the be-all and end-all for your score. Don't hang your hat on that being what creates a handicap. Speak to your pro about becoming a reasonable bunker player. You just got to get the thing out of the bunker. I would focus my attention, if I was you, on learning the high chip and the low chip. Long and short putts. Get out there and practice putts from a very short distance, and then once you've done that, do some sort of, when I say a short distance, I mean no more than that. Then go to that, to that, to that. And you'll start to get to a point where you say, well, hang on, I'm not that much further away from the hole here, but boy, oh boy, it looks a bit edgy now and I might not get the ball in the hole. So practice those. And like I said to you earlier, practice those long putts. That's what really happens. Understand par and standard scratch. What is your par? That's the most important thing. And then play from the tees which represent your distance. You and I shouldn't play from the same tees if you're hitting the ball much less distance than I am. The sixth point I said was writing down your scorecards and creating your own par. And the seventh point is to set yourself some long-term goals. Establish what your handicap goal is, but you can only do that if you've established what your handicap ability range is right now. So if there are any questions, send them on to me right now. If not, then we'll wrap up and I'll do another session for you relative to any feedback that I get from you. I hope that's been helpful for you. A lot of it is keeping it simple. A lot of it is establishing a notion of where you are at the minute. And then do not underestimate the how familiarity really bridges the gap between where you might be now and where you'd like to be with the game. Just playing and being familiar with the course, the game, getting to the first tee, the nerves surrounding that is a big step. Tiger Woods says that he still feels as nervous now as he did when he was a teenager playing in competitions. You'll never get rid of that nerves. It's how you control it. That makes it an enjoyable game. Well, look, enjoy your golf. Thanks ever so much for tuning in. I hope you're all surviving this lockdown without golf. Any help I can be, do let me know. richard.harrison@roehamptonclub.co.uk. And then any questions, I'll send you a response. All the best.